Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining us for the panel today on creating delightful product experiences. Before we kick off with the key discussion points, it'd be great to get just a couple of minutes introduction from each of you, a bit about your background and what just a few brief words on what a perfect product experience looks like to you and your customers. So, Kaz, do you want to kick off? We've just heard from
goodness.
you.
Okay, yep.
You've already got a lapel.
Oh God, you're
Do you
absolutely.
want two
Why am I
mics?
trying to double mic again? Oh dear. Cool. So yeah, as I said, I'm a senior product manager at the BBC. I work in enterprise. I have about 85 apps. A little bit out of breath because I just ran to get water and back again. So I'm not just really nervous. And what makes a great product? Is your question?
Yeah, what's a perfect product experience look like to you or your
Product
customers?
experience, brilliant stakeholders. I think for me, the best product experience is it can be a really, I'm going to use bad language, I hope that's okay. It can be a really shitty process. If at the end of it, you've got users of your product that come back to you and say, this was life-changing and this makes a real difference to me, that for me, regardless of whatever came before it, is a brilliant product experience because it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, thank you. Renia?
Hi everyone, I'm Renia. I'm head of product innovation at InstaShop. Before that, I was working as a senior product manager at Deliveroo, the B2B experience, and before that at eBay, looking after their experimentation services team, so lots of A/B testing. Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with you. It's all about getting this feedback directly from your customers, your users, and loving the product or having even recommendations of how you could even improve it. But also for me, it's how do you create a good environment at work? How do you make your team, your engineers work together and feel they love working together and they have both your vision and what you want to build, so everyone is aligned. And of course, at the end of the day, you want your customers to love your product. But for me also, it's important to have a good working environment and make your engineers feel we're all working towards the same goal. It's not like the PM, the bad guy, and you have your tickets, you work on them, and we're just two different sides. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ilya. I'm working with CleverTap. We have actually a product that solves for engagement and retention for consumer brands. So my angle is actually twofold. So we have a product, software as a service, which actually needs a delightful experience as well. But our product actually allows consumer brands to create experiences for users within their product. So that can be web or app. My background is actually in interface design. So that's optimizing user experience, interacting with machines. And I've been running a game studio for a long time. And in my opinion, that's one of the most intense experiences you have as a user, because it's basically you submerge yourself in an environment. And if I look at my ideal product experience, is that it needs to evoke some kind of emotion. For me, experiences are tied to emotions. So I think if you're doing anything that doesn't evoke any kind of emotion, it's just flat lines. You should, of course, avoid the negative emotions. But I think the best thing is if people experience positive emotions on your product, and then that's actually a delightful experience for me.
Hey everyone, I'm Yvonne from Hootsuite. I currently lead our core product marketing team over there. And my take on product experiences is if your sales team actually is excited about selling the product as well. So I come from a B2B background, and I totally understand and agree 100% with what the three of you said. But currently we're going through an exercise where we're trying to delight our sales teams and make them confident about our SaaS product that we have. So we're the world's most widely used social media management company. That's a little bit of a challenge right now for us to make sure that we always stay authentic and maintain that.
Awesome, thank you all. So we've got a really interesting range of experiences and organisation types that you're currently at. How do you create compelling experiences in different environments? Thinking about startup, enterprise, different company sizes. Who'd like to go?
Okay, cool. Well, I'll be happy to start. And being on the marketing side, kind of represent more of like the business thinking, and then work very closely with stakeholders across the product world. In my opinion, I think that it's really important to double down on understanding what your competitors do and be able to bring those actionable insights back to the product team, because I think that there is a very good connection between product marketing and product to be able to contextualize that information and understand what it is that we can do to either be at market parity or to be better than the competitors. The second and final thing I'll mention is around product NPS. So, clearly being able to measure that level of experience, what is being marketed, what's being built to our users, and making sure that they're continuously satisfied with the experience. So that's across different sizes and different companies.
So in the end, I think if you want to build an experience, it doesn't really matter if you're small or big, but I think on the end it's important how you approach it. But for me, and for especially the teams at the CleverTap, that's what I've learned, is that you actually start role playing the game with the customer. So you actually take into account, okay, what does the customer want, and what's the experience that the customer needs. We work a lot with travel, so travel is actually something that's a lot of emotion, and then you can define stages, pre-travel, during the travel, post-travel, and then what kind of emotions do people go through during these processes. And then if you define those, then you can actually, the good example was, okay, your flight gets canceled, and you get a push notification or a message, your flight is canceled. Well, that's a bad experience. But if you then happen to be, as a product owner or a company, to deliver a service that actually solves this problem, you get a new ticket, or actually they take this moment that could be really bad and they turn it into something good, then you can actually change it around and make something good from something bad. And I think that's actually what you start doing when you, instead of trying to build feature and then just check if the feature was well perceived, look at the other way around, like what's the end goal, and then track it back towards, okay, what's every step you need to take to come to the full good experience. That's actually what I should do. I think it's easier in relatively smaller and medium-sized companies because you have more flexibility. And I think that's the biggest issue with the large companies, that then you actually start just focusing on building features instead of building an experience.
Yeah, I think I'll just stay on your last point. I had experience working both in bigger companies like eBay and then Deliveroo just after that, or now InstaShop, which is like 100 people. And the main difference is the speed that you deliver the new features. It's not like the speed of working. Your engineers work at the same speed. It's like how comfortable the company is to release a new feature. At eBay, we would spend, we would A/B test every single thing, even like the color of a button or the color of a phrase or the size of it. Like it's every single thing, just to test if the experience is okay before you listen to users. And then it was a huge shock for me moving from this kind of way of working to Deliveroo, where we had like 1 million competitors in the 16 markets, and we would have to release new features like every single day without enough testing. But that's the type of company and the type of it's the phase that they are, that you have to do it, and you should feel comfortable releasing stuff and take them back, and if they're not working. I think as a PM you should have to adapt to the different kind of like companies and environments, but I think like the ways of working as a team is almost the same in every type of company.
I'm already mic'd. So when I started working in product at the BBC, it was 2013, and just to give you an idea of the kind of environment I was operating in, the BBC is a juggernaut. It's enormous, and it is linked to hundreds of different small, very bespoke systems. So we had a SAP version, or SAP or SAP? SAP? Yeah, let's go for that. Thank you. Which was about maybe 8 to 10 years behind the standard, which meant that everything in it was customized and everything was bespoke. Now, you might think to yourself, why are you saying that? Because this is about great product experiences. The problem was, we needed to work with those systems. So at the time, there were lots of really lengthy 18, 24-month projects to go through and try and upgrade those experiences somehow. And fundamentally, it just came down to changing a button colour or changing the font. So I walked into the BBC, and at the time I was working in mobile apps. So I was taken on in a kind of consultancy role in a team of, at the time when I was hired, it was just me and my boss. There were two of us, and we were tasked with bring mobile apps to the BBC, make apps for staff. There's two of us. So we had to basically try and scale up something that worked for everyone. It gave us a lot of freedom, but at the same time, in order to create things that were useful for people, so being able to change your password remotely if you were logged out of a system. And in the BBC, there are lots of systems to be logged out of. Being able to book leave remotely, or being able to just look like basic details up about a person so you can contact them on the move. So there was a thing there of, it wasn't even necessarily about like thinking about compelling experiences. It was just, how the F do we get the data out of those old shonky systems, yes, that's a word, and into the kind of products that we were trying to build. So it wasn't even as if we were given a proper greenfield project. It was just, here, we've got some old systems, none of the APIs are working, also the documentation that we do have for them doesn't work because it's all custom, and we're just trying to make good stuff. So I'm talking for too long, sorry. But it was the same with kind of the web apps that we've built. It's exactly the same problem. So I now look after 85 of them, so somehow we've managed to get around that, right? So first of all, you figure out how to get the data out. Then I'm going to use the word ingest again. You ingest it into your own database, which means that you control the data, and then you can pull that out and do what you want with the front end. So in order to make experiences better than the existing one, we didn't have to do much. We could have just had a plain text page, and with the information that they needed, would have been 100 times better than what they already had. So actually, for us, it was quite easy to make a nice experience because it was already going to be 1,000,000 times better. So what we ended up doing was just using the kind of absolute basic, out-of-the-box, scalable, modern technologies. And so we started using, for web apps, AngularJS and Bootstrap. Nothing particularly custom about it, but the big thing for us was just getting the data out. If you use reusable and kind of large existing frameworks, you can scale things up, and people already know how to use them, because every single one of us uses websites that have used AngularJS. Now we use React. But you've all used these technologies. So interacting with these websites, we're all familiar with how Bootstrap works. So it feels like, to create a compelling experience, you just give them the data they need in a format that they understand. So for me, and maybe, as I say, this is maybe enterprise specific here. And again, forgive me, I have talked for quite a long time on this one. But yeah, it was just not even about making it fancy and competitive. It was just trying to get something there in the first place.
Excellent.
Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you, that's great. Before I ask my next question, audience, you should have been using Slido throughout the day. Please feel free to shoot over some questions. We're going to move it onto the Slido slide at some point. We will see your questions and we'll move on to them. Kaz, that was,
Oh dear.
when you were talking just then, kind of you mentioned the scale of the BBC, and it kind of feeds quite nicely into kind of the next question is kind of, how do you build really competitive product experiences at scale? And that's for all of you, but if you'd like to kind of kick us off.
Yeah, it's all that good stuff I was saying. It's about using technology libraries that are modern, but also well used. You don't want to use nunchucks or something that nobody knows about, because then you can hire people that understand how to use your technology out of the box. AngularJS was very popular for a while. We're now using React. These are both JavaScript frameworks for anyone who isn't particularly familiar with them. So we can easily hire good people because we're not looking for specific expensive skills. So that makes it a lot easier to then find good people who've got the balance of the kind of design, UX and technology backgrounds to kind of bring that to the kind of product. I suppose there's also reusable components. So we create kind of these. Does everyone know what I mean by components? Wave your hand if you don't know what I mean. Okay, so like components are almost like I want to say like widgets. So you might have a button or a box or a header. So you have these little kind of elements of the website that you're building that you will create as components in your code that you can then call on and then reuse across everything. It means that you're not custom making everything every time, It means that you're reusing all of the existing UI patterns, and it means every single time you make a site, and if you make it from a boilerplate template, which is the other thing that we do, so we have templated sites, everything is scaffolded, it looks the same, it feels the same. It means that the actual custom code is limited. So I'd say, yeah, that's probably how I would do it, is using components, modern libraries, and making sure that everything's consistent. Sorry.
Renee.
The only thing I would add is like, especially when you're in a small startup that's doing well, it's also good to think about like, where you're heading to, where are the business goals, the company goals. Like I remember we wouldn't expect the growth that we had at Deliveroo. So at some point we couldn't handle the volume of the orders that we would get. The site may have gone down a couple of days or more. So having the right people joining the company at the right time when you're expecting to grow faster is good, because you make sure you have the right tools and infrastructure in place that can manage the growth of the company. Just make the right decision at the right time, so you won't end up with a monolithic service that you won't be able to manage, and you'd have then to pause like feature work and focus only on ability work, which is something that everyone enjoys doing. I mean, engineering-wise, but like you don't add anything fancy for the customers. But yeah.
Yeah, the thing I can add is that actually we were big in India, so the scale is immense there. We have customers that have over 100 million monthly active users, and then it becomes a whole different challenge. And I think what they've managed to do and what we've managed to do as a company is actually allow a platform to find, okay, what's the value for each specific user using your product. And I think that's in its essence the key, and especially in the field we're in, which is partly marketing automation and retention, just sending people information about your product. 10 years ago was pretty standard. Everybody just sent one email, and then we got push, and you got one push, so everybody disabled their push. And what we now and there's some other players in the market allow you to do is understand audience intelligence, like what's your audience doing? Because I think that's the key where it starts. Understanding the value for each specific user of your product. That can be web, app, mobile web, but also in general. Customer support. If you call the people, it's just it's a way of identifying the need from every specific user, and then having the tooling to actually be able to engage with your user in the right way. And I think that's in the end where you then really add value, and the people feel personally connected with your product. And it's not just a great experience for them and a delightful experience, but it's also creating brand value for yourself, because that's actually the key value then, because every individual sees you as somebody who knows what they want. So I think finding and identifying key values for each of your specific customers is really important, being small or big.
So I'd like to add, as we scale up to enterprise, it's likely that if you're, especially in B2B, you might have a professional services team or even a customer support team that has access to admin tooling that will help the end customer, right? So in our experience here at Hootsuite, for example, we've discovered that the admin tools that are used by the services team that need a massive upgrade, and that in itself is an experience that I think our product team is now addressing. So I wanted to kind of point out maybe on that sort of internal customer side on the product experience, it's very important to make sure that not only are you building the great product experience that's external facing, but giving your internal teams, the internal support teams, the tools that they need to facilitate that external customer experience. So if your admin tool is broken, for example, you got to fix it.
To add to this, I think you to be ready for scale is if you start adding frameworks like the customer experience maturity model, then you can actually start identifying. You create a reverse timeline of everything during the process, like every stage of the growth of the customer or consumer, and then you can start identifying the gaps where that will fall there, and you can actually start before they happen already. Start taking into account that you start running into certain problems if you scale. So I think that's something that you then can prevent from happening, because in the end, that's what you want to do. I think that's the biggest challenge we all have, is you run into the problems when they occur, but by using frameworks, you actually start identifying problems before they occur, and you can actually be one step ahead of the curve, and then you won't run into this problem. So I think that's what we've done in our company, and I think that's very. That's up to the leaders of the teams. I think that's where they excel.
I feel like you have to be really careful with the kind of number of frameworks and things that you include, though, because I feel like maybe you've had similar experiences where you try and do too much at once, and the more tools and things you have going on, the just more complex it is. So for me, I think it's choosing the right kind of frameworks, the right kind of tools, and choosing them strategically. Because I think quite often I see examples where people have tried to just incorporate too much into things.
No, I completely agree, but it's more like a design framework than a software framework. So I think it's a way to identify opportunities, and also and especially if you look at experiences and mapping out emotions during every step of the process, and then focusing on building that actually will improve the emotion while using your product. So it's not that I say you have to put everything into a framework, because then you get very rigid, but I think you need to have the flexibility. But again, to prevent something from happening, you need to backtrack and identify what potentially could happen. And I see that happening too often, that people just build a feature, release it, get the feedback from the consumer, then do the next feature, and then you're building feature on feature. And in the end, I think if you then want to avoid running into issues, then you have a bigger problem than that you try to actually predict, like, what's the best experience I could build as a company.
Yeah, some of that comes into planning as well, doesn't it? Because of course, if you don't plan what you're going to do, you end up that kind of release and then feedback and then release and feedback is a kind of fake agile. So agile being you create something and then you assess it and you go back and then you iterate through. It's fake agile because it's actually what we call waterfall, which is where you just kind of keep the stream of things coming. And there's a start and there's an end to something. That's not
especially the effect on all these steps. If you're in step 4, oh shit, now I got to go back all the way to step 1. And I think that's what you want to avoid, because that's the worst experience. Yeah.
It's kind of having a holistic view of your kind of product as a whole and getting the right kind of feedback at the right time. I'd say in the BBC we have an area called UX and design, and I think the UX and design team are amazing. They're all super smart people and they can absolutely get into the mind of your user. The problem sometimes is people involved at the wrong point of a project. If we're just discovering something, it hasn't gone into a product cycle, we're just trying to figure something out, we're creating a prototype, and prototyping is kind of important for what we do. They could spend 2 years on a prototype that could have taken someone 2 weeks to just put together and then share and get feedback, which will then feed into then going into a proper product. So it feels sometimes, I think that's what it really meant, is just this kind of using them at the right time, but also not just throwing everything in at the wrong time. It's choosing your frameworks wisely, I think.
Awesome. Sorry. René, I wanted to jump back to something that you and both you and Ilya mentioned when we were talking about the first question in different environments, and that was features. And how do you prioritize features versus reliability?
Yeah. So as I said before, in my previous job, and actually it's something that we're facing right now, is the job is like, when your company grows like really fast, you just write code on top of code on top of code, and you end up with like a monolithic service that will take you down at some point. And you hope that this is not going to happen soon, but at some point it's going to happen. So, and then as a business, you have to make a case, as a product manager, you have to make a case to the business that, we have to pause like any feature work and just focus on reliability. And that's something that the engineers are begging for. But you have to be their voice to the business, to your CEO, to your sales team, and just say that, in order to grow faster, in order to allow your teams to do the job, reliability work is important. So restructuring your services, delete any code that hasn't been used for years, or everything about the components and the libraries that you're going to be using, or the way you're going to design stuff from now on, or how do you make, also your team grows, you might start with one product team and at some point you end up with 15, 20 different product teams, and you have to start thinking how the different product teams work with each other. Do all of them have the same information about the new services that they're created? So there is feature work is important for the customers. It's important for the business to grow and approach new customers, but also if you don't have a service that is up and running 24/7, then you don't have a business. So for me, reliability work is important, and we also include it as part of our sprint. So even when there's not a big issue, we have we assign 20% of our sprint to work that our engineers want to do to maybe rewrite some code or fix a bug that really bugs them, or improve the speed that they're releasing the code. So as a PM, I'm rather happy if they do 15 to 20% of their time every week just do reliability work.
Yeah, I think you need to make bold decisions sometimes. And it was interesting. I talked to my CTO yesterday. He's brilliant, so I don't understand everything he says, but most of it I got. So basically, it's sometimes you see a problem arising, and then you need to be taking immediate steps. Especially in the size we're at now, if we wouldn't have taken some drastic measures in the past, of just saying, okay, either. I know that for a fact in 6 months of work, once have been thrown away because they said if we continue this development, then now maybe we add the value, but at a certain scale you won't. But I think that's a different thing than just user experience. That's basically being wise in engineering, and it's sometimes too hard to just backtrack it. I know that some of our competitors have done it, but they took them 2 years to just come back to the same level. But I think for me, user experience is not just the engineering. The whole company needs to be focused on complete user experience. It's not one team, everyone. Also we talked about sales. For me, if my sales team goes out and talks to the customer, that's the first user experience they have. They need to be reliable. I don't want anyone to sit down with a PowerPoint and, this is what we do. No, sit down, identify the challenges my customer have, do a whiteboard session, talk about the same challenges and how we've solved them, or how we can help you solve them, or get their feedback, how we can make our product better. So I think, and that is already the first point of contact, which is for me also user experience. And then if they actually go through the contract phase, another step, and then they're not even using the product yet. So I think it's actually just exciting to see where you all can actually optimize. And in the end, if it's in the DNA of the company, I think that's the challenge. If you haven't set up the company and with the user experience and the customer experience in mind, then in the end you will not win.
Yvonne, where do you stand on this from a kind of business commercial viewpoint? Sorry. Where do you stand on features versus reliability from a business commercial standpoint?
So what I typically do is I would work with our product team and a software team to really bring the voice of the customer, the voice of marketing and sales, and use that to sort of balance out the priorities. I totally hear that we do need a very performant platform, and typically that's for us to understand how long that's going to take and when we can expect those fixes to be in. And then on the marketing side, we work to change the narrative and move away from feature launches, right? Every product release and every product roadmap communication doesn't have to be about that. Our responsibility is to share the vision and share the value of our entire solution suite. So I think for me, I would definitely bias with working with product, given that I am from product marketing, and just making sure that we are able to understand what we need with the customer. So I want to also kind of double click on what you said about having the user experience as the DNA of the entire organization. I totally agree with that piece. And I'm pretty sure in most of our organizations, we have not just the sales teams, but services teams, UX design, who are responsible for that. And I wanted to share that at Hootsuite, for example, we recently have a new PMM who is actually responsible for services. And her role is to work with product, to work with sales, and identify a consistent user experience that is all the way from pre-sales to post-sales. And she will bring in the product teams to be customer-facing, speak with the customers, that sort of thing. So I think that's a really interesting tactic that we're using right now.
Awesome, thanks. We only have a few minutes left before lunch and before everyone needs to go and catch a flight. Do we have anything on the Slido? Do we have any questions from the audience? Fantastic. So how do you influence stakeholders to invest in non-functional features to improve customer experience? Stakeholders, that sounds like your bag, Kaz.
Yeah, how do you influence stakeholders to invest in non-functional features? So this comes back to what I was saying about you needing to work with people. I mean, non-functional features could be anything. I suppose maybe text changes. That was the example I gave earlier of needing somebody wanting to change some text. Part of it is using data if you've got it. So use your data from your users to demonstrate why you should do something. But as I said earlier, that's not going to work for everyone. So you're going to have to employ some of those tactics I was talking about. Maybe catching up with people separately in order to get them to understand where you're coming from, and then that will then waft up, is a phrase I used earlier, waft up to your senior leaders who will then, champion it through, because their trusted people will champion it for you. That would be my kind of best advice. But yeah, data is your first thing. You've got to show why it makes a difference. Yeah.
Any other comments from other panelists? Anything to add? No? Fantastic. And the next, do you think user experience and design should sit within individual product teams or oversee the end-to-end workflow?
What I've done before in previous companies, and we actually start doing right now at AceShop, is every product team would have their own product designer that would work very closely with the PM for the specific product. But we would try to rotate the product designers to move from different product teams, like, I don't know, every now and then. So they also get an idea about other type of user problems, or work with different engineers and different product managers. So they'll have the whole picture, like, all the applications that we have at the company, or different user problems. So I think for me it's important to have a designer focused on my product, because they really get to know the problems and the user. But it's also important to just allow people to move to different product teams, not just designers, but engineers as well, and get to know different sides of the business and different customers within your company.
Yeah, so here I'm not directly involved in product development, so it's on a higher level. But what I know is that we have different pods focusing on, it's more than just a feature, of course, but I think the product teams and building specific pieces of the product, it's very important that they really are like creating the experience for that specific part. Of course, it needs to have some kind of a holistic overview of where it all leads towards the overarching vision. But I think that's very important, because then submerge themselves into what they want to build and what they want to achieve and what they want to convey. Because I think in that sense, it's the most important, it's the most valuable thing we can provide, an experience. And I think if that's done pod by pod, so a product team, for me, that would be logical.
I actually wanted to affirm what you were saying, Renia. So even at our organization, it's exactly the same structure, what you said, having a designer per portfolio or pod. And to your point about having that overlay, so we actually have a dedicated UX research team. And what they do is they look at the end-to-end jobs to be done workflow. And that would be the master framework, whereby the designers per pod would supplement that. So I just wanted to kind of give some clarity and show that, across different organizations, we have very similar structures.
One small thing to add is as engineers, review each other's code. Another useful thing to have is having designers to review each other's work. So sometime a designer from my product team would ask for feedback from other designers from different product teams that they're not familiar with the user or the specific problems. And, they would create design documents, they would share with more people, or they would sit down and discuss their work. So that's also useful, not just, for engineers to review the code, but designers or even PMs, when we write a brief, I used to ask for feedback from other PMs, so that could also help with making sure they have visibility across the business, not just the specific product.
Fab, thank you. And so my final question before we break is, how important is it, do you think, to have a vision for your product?
The most important thing. If you don't have a vision, then you can't get people behind you. And by people, it could be your stakeholders. You've got to give them a vision to understand what you're trying to do. You've got to give the developers a vision, because otherwise they're just going to be coding into nothingness and they won't be connected to your product. So having workshops with people to get them behind a vision is kind of key. Yeah, absolutely. The first thing with any new thing that we build is to think about the kind of vision for it. What do we want it to be doing in a few years' time? And how can everyone involved with that feed into it, so then they also feel like they've got a part of it too.
Yeah, and to add to that, like exactly what you said, and the other important thing is to remind people about your vision. It's just not one-time work. You just do it at the beginning of the quarter, beginning of your year, and then you forget about it. You have to remind your engineers, your design, your team about your vision, and also change it if things change, if the company changes, the strategy changes. So work on the vision, but also have it somewhere on your desk, or keep reminding to your engineers every now and then is also important.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, I mean, the experience is the highest economic value you can create as a company, and that starts with a vision. You know, it's not just a product, it's not a service. It's like, what do you want the user to experience? And I think so. Vision is essential, but I think, well, without a vision, you won't build a successful company anyway. I think again, you're just filling a need, and that's fine. But I think personally, I want to believe in a vision and want to go there. So I think it's also the own experience of working for a company like that, and I only want to experience it for a vision.
So I guess to wrap us up, I think we live in an era of user-led growth. We talk about product-led growth, right? But primarily it is the user who discovers a piece of software or tool that they love, and then they spread it across the organization. So as such, when we think about it from that perspective, it's also important that the product vision is shared across the entire organization, and it gets evangelized outside of the product team, so that the customer-facing teams can then share that across to our users. So 100%, whether it's a 3-year, 5-year, I think it's dependent on the organization, but yes.
I just want to add, actually, I think, because we talked about vision, and maybe we have an understanding of what vision is. And just to clarify what I think vision is, it's adding narrative to your product. It's adding a story to your product. And that's why it's important for everyone to get behind it. It means that they can advocate for your product because they understand the story of what it's trying to do. I think narrative is really what underpins all of that kind of, how do you get people excited? How do you influence people? How do you get people to engage with it? So yeah, sorry, I didn't realize we were talking about vision. But I don't know.
No, it's true. That maps back to the customer journey, the vision, the whole storytelling, and then you're actually on the point of, okay, what do people want from me, and how do I optimize that? So I fully agree. Well said.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll wrap things up. Thank you so much to my fantastic panelists. A massive round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen.